How do you catch 10,000 fish without boats, engines, or modern gear? And do it sustainably. Welcome to the world of Inuit fishing, where stone weirs, sinew nets, and bone spears come together in a brilliant strategy passed down through generations. Did you know that some villages could catch enough Arctic char in one season to feed the entire community all winter? From fish weirs shaped like crescents to ice fishing nets and spiritual rituals honoring sea goddesses, every method is built on teamwork, timing, and deep respect for nature. Curious how ancient knowledge beats high-tech tools in the Arctic, or how fish were kept fresh for weeks using nothing but rock piles and freezing air? Hit that subscribe button and let's dive into the ingenuity of Inuit survival and community fishing. Did you know that 64,000 Inuit live across Canada today? These remarkable people have made the Arctic their home for thousands of years, surviving in one of the world's coldest and most challenging environments. What's even more amazing is that the Inuit invented everyday tools like kayaks, snowshoes, and snow goggles, ingenious creations that help them adapt to life in the north. Most Inuit live in a vast region known as Inuit Nunangat, which means the place where Inuit live in Inuktitut, their traditional language. This area includes land, water, and sea ice north of the 60th parallel and throughout the Arctic archipelago, making up nearly 40% of Canada's total landmass. Can you believe that? Through land claim agreements, the Inuit gained recognition of 4 large regions: Inuvialuit in the Northwest Territories and Yukon, Nunavik in northern Quebec, Nunatsiavut in Labrador, and Nunavut, Canada's newest territory. These areas are home to 53 Inuit communities spread across 3 territories and 2 provinces. What's more, the Inuit share deep historical ties with other indigenous peoples from Norway, Russia, Finland, Sweden, Iceland, and the United States. For over 1,000 years, the Inuit in Canada's Arctic, especially in Nunavut, have relied on fishing to survive. But here's the thing, fishing isn't just about catching fish for the Inuit. It's a huge part of their culture, their identity, and their connection to the land. So how did they come to master this art in one of the harshest places on Earth? Fishing has always been super important to the Inuit. It's not just about food, it's about respect for nature and understanding the seasons. Having to learn how to fish in a cold environment where the ice and snow are constant, that's what makes the Inuit fishing techniques so impressive. Over centuries of trial and error, they figured out how to catch fish all year round. What's even cooler is that this knowledge has been passed down orally from one generation to the next. So it's a tradition that's kept alive through stories, teachings, and experience. The Inuit view fishing as a communal activity where the entire village comes together to provide for each other. They don't just catch fish, they also give thanks for what the land and sea provide. How powerful is that? Next time you think about fishing, you might just think about the deep tradition and skill the Inuit have mastered in one of the toughest environments on Earth. Now that we understand why fishing is vital to Inuit life, let's explore the incredible traditional methods they've developed over centuries to thrive in one of the world's harshest environments. If you've ever tried fishing, you know that patience is key. But for the Inuit, fishing was so much more. It was a mix of resourcefulness, craftsmanship, and yes, a lot of patience. The Inuit developed a variety of unique and creative fishing techniques that helped them thrive in the harsh Arctic environment. One of the oldest and most interesting methods was hand fishing. Imagine grabbing fish directly from streams or rivers with just your hands. As time passed, the Inuit got even more inventive and created tools like weirs, harpoons, and spears. These tools allowed them to catch large quantities of fish, and they did all of this without the help of modern technology. It's incredible to think that with just basic tools and deep knowledge of the land, the Inuit could catch thousands of fish to feed their communities. How did they do it? The ingenuity is truly mind-blowing. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? In the winter months, the Inuit turned to spear fishing. When the rivers froze over, they carefully cut holes in the ice and waited for their catch. The cold made endurance even more essential. How did people develop such advanced techniques without the technology we have today? The Inuit used harpoons with detachable heads, which allowed them to efficiently spear fish under the ice. Think about it, sitting in the cold, carefully aiming with precision, and pulling up a fish after hours of waiting. Tolerance and skill in perfect harmony. How did they learn what worked and what didn't? Among all these ingenious techniques, one particularly stands out for its simplicity and effectiveness: the fish weir. Let's take a closer look at how these ancient stone traps worked. Have you ever heard of the fish weir used by the Inuit? It's such a clever and effective fishing tool that might surprise you with its simplicity. In Inuktitut, it's called saputi or haputi in Inuinnaqtun, and it was used at the mouths of rivers to catch fish as they swam upstream. The weirs were built with stones and shaped like a crescent, guiding the fish into narrow channels where they could be easily caught. Pretty cool, right? But here's the best part. These weren't just passive traps. Teamwork was key. One person, known as the watcher, would stand on the shore and keep an eye on the fish. When the time was right, they would signal to others to close off the passage and start catching. It was all about timing and working together. Isn't it amazing how much they understood about the fish's behavior and the river's flow? Now think about this. Could we learn a thing or two from these ancient methods today? With all the technology we have, it's easy to overlook the value of working with nature instead of against it. The Inuits' approach was all about sustainability, making sure they didn't take more than the river could provide. Isn't it something we could apply in our own lives? Think this. You're sitting next to a cold stream, the air crisp and fresh, just waiting for the fish to swim right into your net. Sounds peaceful, right? This is what it was like for Inuit fishermen using nets woven from animal sinew or leather, a unique and clever method that blends patience with skill. These nets weren't just ordinary fishing tools. They were designed specifically for the Arctic char runs, which happened when these fish migrated in large numbers. This was a key time for fishing, and the nets were set up to catch them efficiently. In winter, the nets were even placed in holes cut in the ice. Talk about resourcefulness. Have you ever wondered how something so simple could work so well? The nets were designed so that once the fish swam in, they couldn't escape. It was almost like the fish didn't stand a chance. But that's not all. The Inuit didn't just rely on nets. They also created lures made from bones, shells, and even antlers. These lures, combined with hand lines, attracted fish like the Arctic char, a prized catch. Being able to craft such detailed tools with just what you could find around you, no modern technology needed. What's even more fascinating is how these traditional methods have survived over time. Have you ever thought about how these age-old techniques compare to the way we fish today? With all the high-tech gear and commercial methods out there, it's amazing to think how effective these simple tools were. The Inuit fishing methods are a brilliant example of working with nature and using what's available to survive and thrive. So, what do you think? Would you trade modern fishing methods for a chance to try the Inuits' old-school nets and lures? It's a great reminder of the incredible connection people can have with their environment. In situations where nets weren't ideal, Inuit fishers turned to a weapon requiring exceptional skill and timing, the kakivak. Let's explore how this three-pronged spear was used with deadly precision. Have you ever thought about how people fished hundreds of years ago, long before we had modern fishing rods and fancy equipment? One of the coolest tools that comes to mind is the kakivak, a traditional Inuit fishing spear. This spear, with its three-pronged head, was made for precision, and it's truly incredible to think about how well it worked. So, how did it work exactly? The central prong would pierce the fish, and the two barbed prongs on the sides would hold it in place. Sounds pretty simple, right? But imagine fishing in open water, or even under thick ice with just this spear. It took serious skill, patience, and a deep understanding of the environment. Can you picture yourself trying to spear a fish like that? It wasn't just about strength. It was all about being accurate and timing it just right. What's even more impressive is how the Inuit adapted the kayak to different fishing conditions. Whether it was fishing in the sea or through ice, they made sure their tools were ready for whatever the environment threw at them. Isn't it amazing to think about how they managed to do all this with just natural materials and their knowledge of the land and sea? When we think about fishing today, we have all these gadgets, but the Inuit didn't need them to be successful. They relied on patience and a deep connection to the land to create tools like the kakivak. Do you think you could have fished like that? It makes you appreciate the skill and intelligence behind their tools. The kakivak wasn't just a spear, it was a tool of precision shaped by centuries of learning and adapting to nature. How do you think these traditional tools compare to the high-tech fishing gear we use today? Once caught, fish had to be preserved in freezing temperatures without modern refrigeration. We hope you're enjoying it. If so, then hit that subscribe button and the bell for more updates. Storing fish in the Arctic isn't something most of us have to worry about, but the Inuit developed some incredibly smart ways to keep their catch fresh. Have you ever wondered how people in such a cold place manage to store food when fishing isn't always guaranteed? Well, the Inuit had it figured out. Once they caught their fish, they needed to store it in a way that kept it from spoiling. In the freezing Arctic, fishing wasn't always reliable. Sometimes the weather or ice made it tricky to catch enough food. So, the Inuit came up with a clever solution: fish caches, or peigu. These were stone boxes built by carefully stacking rocks to form a sturdy structure. The fish were placed inside, and then more rocks were piled on top to help keep the fish frozen. Why was this so important? Imagine not being able to fish for days or even weeks because of the weather. That's why these fish caches were a game changer. They helped the Inuit preserve fish for long periods, even when they couldn't go out fishing. It was their way of making sure food was always available, no matter what the weather did. Pretty smart, right? Think about it. Food storage in such an extreme environment is a huge challenge. Wouldn't it be tough to store food when the temperatures are so freezing? We usually rely on fridges and freezers today, but the Inuits' method was a great way to work with the environment they had. Even though we use modern tech for food storage, isn't it fascinating how similar the core idea is? Keeping food safe and fresh for later use? Could we learn something from these ancient methods when thinking about sustainability today? Wouldn't it be amazing to see more eco-friendly ways of storing food that also use the environment's natural features just like the Inuit did? Beyond practical survival, fishing carried a deep spiritual meaning. Let's uncover the myths and legends, like Sedna's story, that gave emotional and cultural depth to the act of harvesting from the sea. Fishing isn't just about catching fish. For many cultures, it's a deeply spiritual practice. Take the Inuit, for example. They didn't just see fishing as a way to get food. They believed in the power of Sedna, the sea goddess, who controlled all the creatures in the ocean. If Sedna wasn't happy, the Inuit believed they could face starvation. Now, isn't that fascinating? Here's how the legend goes. Sedna was once a beautiful young woman. After a storm, her father cast her into the sea. As she sank deeper, something incredible happened. Her fingers transformed into sea creatures like whales and seals. These creatures, as you can imagine, were essential to the Inuit for food and survival. Sedna's blessing was the key to a good hunt, so the Inuit made sure to honor her with rituals to ask for her favor. Isn't it amazing how myths can shape the way people see the world around them? For the Inuit, their connection to Sedna wasn't just a belief, it was essential for survival. They didn't just fish, they honored the sea and all the creatures in it. In a way, these stories helped them understand how to live in harmony with nature, don't you think? Here's something to think about. What role do myths and legends play in how we view our relationship with the environment? Can you think of any modern myths or ideas that shape how we treat nature today? It's interesting to see how, in some ways, our connection with nature has changed. In many modern cultures, we often see the Earth's resources as things to be used up rather than something to be respected and cared for. How can we bring a little bit of that wisdom into our own lives? With a deep spiritual foundation tied to fishing, it's only natural that food preparation also held cultural significance. Let's dive into how the Inuit traditionally prepared and enjoyed their catch. So, what happens once the fish are caught and stored? Well, the Inuit have some pretty unique ways of preparing and enjoying their catch. For example, Arctic char is often eaten raw. And guess what? The liver and eyeballs are considered special delicacies. It's pretty amazing how they've connected their food practices to their history. And here's something interesting. Cooking fish in Nunavut is a fairly new tradition. Imagine that. What a cool way to preserve ancient customs. In warmer months, the Inuit used a drying method to make sure they had fish to eat during those long, cold Arctic winters. They used a drying rack called pipsiliuvit, or chimikun, where fish would hang and dry out with the help of the sun and wind. This method helped preserve the fish so they could enjoy it when fresh fish wasn't available. Isn't it amazing how they made sure they always had food on hand, even when the weather was extreme? Now let's take a moment to think about this. What would it be like to eat fresh, raw fish as part of your regular meals? Seems a little wild, right? But for the Inuit, it's just part of their way of life. And it's not just about fish. Other foods like seal meat and whale blubber were also preserved using similar methods. How do you think that helped the Inuit survive in such a tough environment? You might also notice that different cultures have their food preservation tricks, like salting, smoking, or even fermenting. It's fascinating to see how each culture uses what's available to them to make sure they have enough food for the future. So, what are some food preservation methods you've come across in other places? Ever tried any unique ones yourself? In the end, the Inuits' methods of preparing and preserving food are more than just practical. They're a beautiful way to stay connected to the land and their history. Isn't that incredible? These traditional dishes tell stories of heritage and resilience. But what happens when ancient practices meet the modern world? Discover how Inuit fishing methods continue to evolve and endure today. Even though modern fishing methods have made their way into Inuit communities, their traditional fishing practices are still going strong. And honestly, there's a reason for that. These methods, developed over centuries, are not just about catching fish. They're about respect for nature, teamwork, and patience. It's fascinating how these age-old techniques are just as relevant today as they were all those years ago. For the Inuit, fishing was never just about putting food on the table. It was, and still is, a way to stay connected to the land and sea. Their fishing techniques are about sustainability, ensuring they take only what they need without harming the environment. How can we do that today? The Inuit were incredibly resourceful, using ice fishing and trap-based methods to catch fish. They used tools like fish weirs and nets, designed to keep fish populations healthy and ensure they could fish for generations to come. Talk about long-term thinking. One cool thing about these fishing traditions is how they bring communities together. Think about your favorite group activity. whether it's a family dinner or a community event. So when we think about the future, how do we make sure these traditions live on? How do we keep the knowledge and practices that have been passed down for centuries alive? The Inuit have shown us that if we take care of the land and sea, they will take care of us. Next time you go fishing, or even when you enjoy a seafood meal, take a moment to appreciate the centuries of tradition behind it. What lessons can we draw from the Inuit to live more sustainably today? As we wrap up, one thing is clear. The Inuit didn't just fish. They mastered survival through harmony with nature. From stone weirs catching thousands of fish to ice caches preserving food for weeks, every method was rooted in sustainability and respect. Isn't it time we looked back to move forward? Could these ancient skills guide our modern choices? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And if this journey through Arctic ingenuity inspired you, subscribe for more stories like this. Don't forget to hit the bell and drop a comment with your favorite technique from the video.